I want to show you what the first 11 verses in the book of Habakkuk are all about. This short little book is really just a conversation between the prophet Habakkuk and God. Here's how the book's structured. First, Habakkuk makes a big complaint to God. But then God hears his complaint and he responds. Habakkuk, however, does not like or agree with God's response, and so he complains again. God then responds to Habakkuk's complaint here in chapter 2, and finally the prophet realizes that God is right. And so he writes this last chapter, which is really just a hymn of praise. Let's take a closer look to see what's going on. Let's look here at the first 4 verses where Habakkuk pours out his first complaint to God. Really, he in these first 4 verses, he lists his complaints up here, and then down here he describes all the evil that's going on in the world around him. Habakkuk's going to ask 4 questions, 4 kind of almost accusing questions of God. He's going to ask these 4 questions here. The first 2 questions are kind of like how long questions. And then the last 2 questions here are why questions. Let's take a look at these. First, the how long questions. How long shall I cry for help and you will not hear? That's a pretty pointed question. God, how long is it going to be that I'm going to be asking and crying out for help, but you won't even hear? Here's the next how long question. How long am I going to be crying to you? Violence. And by the way, violence is going to be a key concept in this text. How long am I going to be crying to you? Violence. And you will not save. Can you hear just right off the bat the prophet's angst even towards God? God, you're just letting the wicked win here in Judah. Those are the how long questions. Now for the why questions. Why do you make me see iniquity? And then this question, why do you idly look at wrong? That is a pointed question, right? God, why is it that you're just being lazy and watching sin run rampant? Then Habakkuk, what he does is there's so much sin going on in his society that he starts to list all the different sin here. There's all kinds of destruction and violence. There's that word again. There's lots of strife and contention. He says there's no justice, and listen to how he describes how there's no justice. The law is paralyzed. Justice never goes forth. The wicked surround the righteous, and justice goes forth perverted. And you could almost put like little air quotes around justice. It's just so-called justice, right? It's perverted. And so Habakkuk calls out to God and he complains, God, why are you letting this happen this way? And then the Lord responds. And here's one of the things that we're going to find in the book of Habakkuk. Oftentimes, when God responds, God solves problems in ways that you and I don't like, and maybe even you and I don't agree with. That's going to happen here in these verses from 5 all the way down through 11. God's going to respond, but Habakkuk is not really going to agree or appreciate God's response. Here's what God's going to say. God is essentially going to say, I am doing something, Habakkuk. I'm going to raise up the Babylonians, the Chaldeans, and I'm going to use them to come and invade Judah and discipline my people for all their sin. That was hardly the response that Habakkuk was expecting. Let's take a closer look. Here in verses 5 and 6, remember Habakkuk had accused God of really being idle over here. You're idly looking at wrong. But God responds to Habakkuk and he says, I'm not being idle. I'm not being lazy. God's saying, I am doing a work. I'm doing a work in your days. Look at these verses. God responds, "Look among the nations and see, wonder and be astounded, for I am doing a work in your days that you would not believe if told. For behold, I am raising up the Chaldeans, that bitter and hasty nation." And he goes on, but God is going to raise up the Babylonians. You know, we talked last time how the Babylonians rose to power. That wasn't just random chance. Do you hear how God describes this? He says, "I am raising up the Chaldeans." So what work is God doing? Well, God is doing this work. He's raising up the Chaldeans, the Babylonians, to come invade his own people, to discipline them. And does that seem to you surprising? Well, that's what God says. He's expecting this to be surprising. Wonder, be astonished. He says, you wouldn't even believe it if I told you. God is raising up the Babylonians to discipline his own people. Now, verses 6 through 11, really, it's just one long description of how really evil the Babylonians are. It describes how powerful they are and how strong they are. And I want you to notice the repetition of the word they. I'm going to circle several of them because these are all who's the they? Well, it's the Babylonians. So notice this: they, their horses. It just keeps going on like this. These are all descriptions of a certain group of people, and it's the Babylonians. So what's so bad about Babylon? Well, God lists a lot of things that are going wrong. He says all these theys refer to the Babylonians. They are a bitter and hasty nation. They seize dwellings not their own. They just sweep in and take things. They are dreaded and fearsome. Justice and dignity go forth from themselves. No one's going to tell them what to do. They tell everybody else how to respond. And they are powerful. They have horses that are swift, swifter than leopards. They're fierce. The people who ride the horses are proud. They come from afar, and they're fast. They fly like an eagle. They're swift. And they come for what? Violence. So God's people are guilty of violence, and he's going to discipline them with a violent nation. And they even gather captives. And that's important because that's what's going to happen to Israel. They're going to be taken captive all the way over to Babylon. God continues to describe how evil the Babylonians are. They mock. So they come up to a nation they're about to devour, and the people try to stop them, and the kings scoff. They laugh. They laugh at every fortress. Like, ha, you think that can stop us? They just pile up the earth and then they take it. And you hear the images of quickness. They sweep in. And these aren't righteous people that God is using to discipline his own children. These are guilty people. They don't worship God. Who is their God? Their own might is their God. So God replies to Habakkuk, I'm not being lazy. I am doing something. I'm doing a work that might surprise you. I'm bringing the Babylonians to come, and they will discipline my people. Now Habakkuk's going to hear that and be astonished and object. And we'll look at that objection more next time. Thank you guys so much for joining us, and we'll see you again next time.